What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Wrestling City, and today we're going to be reacting to another video from Wrestling Flashbacks, and this one is titled The Complicated Legacy of Hulk Hogan. So as we all know by now, Hulk Hogan passed away. This time it would be 2 Thursdays ago, and it was later revealed to be a cardiac arrest is what ended up taking his life. And man, as we all know how social media is, that inevitably led to a lot of mixed opinions online about his death, because I can understand both sides, because personally I did not like the person like Terry Bollea. I think he was, well, racist. You know, he has a lot of complicated situations, but his legacy as a wrestler cannot be denied. And I also think when somebody immediately passes, it's probably not the right time to start disrespecting him all the way in front of, calling out the people who are grieving his death. So I've kind of just went a little silent on this, just paying respects to his family. But we'll go ahead and check out his legacy, all the stuff that happened in his wrestling career and after that. Let's go ahead and check that out right now.
1, 2, is this on?
One name towers above all, Hulk Hogan. With his 24-inch pythons and larger-than-life charisma, Hogan became the face of an entire industry. But behind the red and yellow spectacle lies a legacy as complicated as it is iconic. This is the story of how Terry Bollea rose to immortal fame, created controversy, and left behind a wrestling empire grappling with how to remember its biggest star. This is Hulk Hogan, the complicated legacy of wrestling's biggest icon. Hulk Hogan's journey to superstardom began in the early 1980s, when he exploded onto the scene in Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. With his immense size, Hogan quickly reigned supreme as the WWF's main attraction. In January 1984, he defeated the Iron Sheik for the WWF Championship in Madison Square Garden, igniting what would become known as Hulkamania. As Hogan soon went from a wrestling star to cultural phenomenon. To become Hulk Hogan, Bollea borrowed from one of his idols, superstar Billy Graham, the premier wrestling star of the 70s. With his all-American persona, Hogan rallied millions of fans, or Hulkamaniacs, behind his simple creed: train, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins. Fans treated him like a real-life superhero. Hulk was Americana, like the song said, a real American. And as one of his later entrance themes put it,
that music video is crazy.
He was born and raised in the US of A. He's American-made. Everywhere the WWF went in the 80s, arenas overflowed, screaming his name. Merchandise bearing his likeness flew off shelves. From action figures.
Yeah, man, it's so weird because, obviously I wasn't alive during this time, but it's inevitable. It's undeniable that his legacy is, he's arguably the most well-known superstar in history. Maybe you could probably actually realistically argue that The Rock may be above that, maybe John Cena, but Hulk Hogan is somebody that, kids will know, and even my parents have memories about Hulk Hogan. So when he died, my family, I got so many texts being, because they know I'm a wrestling fan. They're like, hey, that Hulk Hogan passed away? That's crazy. So his legacy transcends just the casual or hardcore wrestling fan,
To bandanas, Hulk Hogan was more than just a wrestler. He was a role model and a living, breathing cartoon hero. Hogan's appeal transcended wrestling. By the mid-80s, his likeness touched every corner of pop culture. Previously, he had already played Thunderlips in Rocky III opposite Sylvester Stallone. Then he would later guest star on TV shows like The A-Team. Just like his friend Mr. T, Hogan was an 80s pop icon in his own right. WrestleMania, the WWF's answer to the Super Bowl, became must-see TV thanks to Hogan's star power, as he squared off against rivals Rowdy Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. They were despised heels and perfect foils for the Hulkster. At WrestleMania 3 in 1987, in front of 78,000 fans in the Pontiac Silverdome, Hogan miraculously body-slammed the 7-foot, 500-pound Andre the Giant. That single image, Hogan hoisting Andre, signified the peak of Hulkamania, a true passing of the torch between two real-life friends, but ringside rivals. Though it was more than a wrestling match, it was a cultural moment covered on news broadcasts and etched into the memory of a generation. With Real American blaring through arenas and thousands of fans chanting his name, Hulk Hogan carried wrestling into the mainstream spotlight. The star power of Hulk Hogan turned McMahon's empire into a global marketing juggernaut. By the end of the 1980s, professional wrestling was on the map in a way that it had never been, largely thanks to the charisma and crossover appeal of its biggest icon. Hogan was, as WWF's own statement remembered, one of pop culture's most recognizable figures,
Oh,
and the man who helped the
easily.
company achieve global recognition in the 1980s. In the 80s and early 90s, Hulk Hogan was undeniably the hero of professional wrestling. He was the ultimate good guy, always defeating the villain, from Bundy to Bossman to Slaughter, all iconic foes. Or how about the legendary run-ins with Macho Man Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior? But if we circle back to when Hogan's fame grew, so did whispers of what was happening behind the curtain. In a business built on scripted outcomes, real power plays were happening out of the spotlight.
Oh,
Hogan
yeah,
was
we
often at the
know
center of
this.
them. Hogan's influence backstage was infamous. Fellow wrestlers have long accused the Hulkster of using his clout to protect his top dog status.
Doesn't work
Sometimes
for
at the
me,
expense of others'
brother.
careers. One infamous instance came at WrestleMania 9 in 1993. Bret the Hitman Hart, one of the company's new stars, was slated to close the show as WWF champion, but in a shocking twist decided the night before, Hogan swooped in after Bret's match and pinned Yokozuna to steal back the WWF title to hot dog and grandstand over the screwed Bret. Years later, the Hitman didn't mince words when reflecting on Mania 9. He felt Hulk had sabotaged his career by
He absolutely did. I mean, it's crazy with these. Like, wrestling, I think a lot of people that just look at this from a casual point of view don't realize the political moves that go behind some of these most popular moments in wrestling history. I mean, think about how ridiculous of a decision that was. So you had Bret Hart versus Yokozuna in the main event, and Yokozuna gets the win. He beats Bret Hart, whatever, and then Hulk Hogan returns, and for literally no reason, he just comes out and supports his buddy Bret Hart, and Bret Hart's like, get him! And then he has a world title shot against Yokozuna and beats him in like 30 seconds or something like that.
Gosh, I'm standing there I feel like I got a big knife in my back. Never felt more betrayed by Vince McMahon than I did that day.
The bitterness lingered for decades. As Bret saw it, Hogan refused to pass the torch, preferring to keep the spotlight on himself. Bret wasn't alone in that sentiment. In the 90s, terms like creative control became synonymous with
Ultimate
Hulk
Warrior
Hogan. He had a
was
say
bad
in
too.
how his matches ended, and more often than not, it was with his hand raised. Wrestlers who might challenge his spot were, according to locker room lore, kept at bay. In Bret's view, Hulk Hogan cared more about preserving his mythos than helping new stars shine. It was a similar story again for Bret in the months going into the 93 SummerSlam. At the event, the Hitman was meant to defeat Hulk for the belt. After the Hulkster had promised Bret he would return the favor from WrestleMania 9, Hogan went back on his promise and refused to work with Hart altogether. Hulk departed from WWF shortly after, so he could focus on acting full-time. Bret believes putting the title back on Hogan was a tactic from Chairman Vince McMahon to try and prevent the Hulkster from joining WCW.
Hogan was putting a lot of pressure on Vince to take the belt and take it off me and put it on him. Otherwise, he was going to go to WCW.
Hulk, however, claims it was all his idea to defeat Yokozuna at Mania, and the plan was always to drop the belt back to Yoko and not Bret.
Bret Hart, who thought I basically sabotaged his career because Bret thought he should have been the greatest wrestler that ever lived, and he said it was my fault. I won the belt from Yokozuna, and the deal was for me to drop it back to Yokozuna. And then Bret got in my face. He goes, hey, you're supposed to drop the belt to me. I said, no, I'm not. He goes, well, yeah, you are, so let's go. Let's talk to Vince then. Went in and sat down and talked to Vince, and Vince looked at Bret and said, Bret, that's what you thought you heard. So ever since then, he hated my guts and wanted to kill me.
I can't believe
Hogan's
a word
reputation
this
for
man
backstage
says.
gamesmanship didn't start with Bret Hart. Back in 1991, The Undertaker defeated
Yup.
Hogan at Survivor Series to win his first WWF Championship, delivering a tombstone piledriver onto a steel chair. But Hogan later claimed it injured his neck. However, replays showed Hogan's head never touched the chair. Undertaker, then only 26, was devastated, thinking he'd hurt the company's top star. But after watching the footage and confronting Hogan, he was stunned by Hogan's excuse that the hold was too tight and left him nowhere to move. Undertaker later said, at that point, I knew what he was about, and that's all I needed.
When I got that answer, I knew all I needed to know about him. And that's the way then, my radar was always up anytime that I had to, interact with him.
Just days later,
I mean, dude, you really had this man, you guys saw his head was like literally feet off of the floor, and when he fell, and now it's kind of a meme at this point, you got me, brother. He hurt his neck. He has to see his family because he doesn't know how long he's gonna live or whatever. I mean, just can you imagine if we had the Undertaker's legacy ended because of this moment? It's just he really had this man thinking he just like ended the career of Hulk Hogan when he had him so protected. Just so ridiculous.
Hogan regained the title at this Tuesday in Texas, and Undertaker couldn't help but feel used that the injury was exaggerated to justify a rematch and preserve Hogan's status. It was a setup from the get-go, he recalled years later.
I knew there was going to be another pay-per-view, but I didn't know that I was going to drop the belt back and what was going on. I mean, that came up out of nowhere.
Taker quietly carried that lesson about Hogan's politics for the rest of his career. Perhaps the most telling story of Hogan's backstage influence comes from 1986, when wrestler turned actor Jesse the Body Ventura attempted something unthinkable at the time, organizing a wrestlers' union. Ventura, frustrated by wrestlers' lack of benefits and job security, held a covert meeting to discuss unionizing just before WrestleMania 2. But when word got out to Vince McMahon, the union talk was quashed overnight. After the fact, Ventura discovered who ratted out the plan: Hulk Hogan. Ventura has never hidden his contempt for Hogan's betrayal. He explained that in old territory days, the worst label a wrestler could earn was office stooge, a mole who pretended to be one of the boys, but secretly fed information to the promoter.
He's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize. With no hesitation, Vince went, Hulk Hogan told me. And I didn't show any emotion, but I almost tipped over in the chair, because he was my friend.
In Ventura's eyes, Hogan's allegiance was only to his own fortune.
When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of?
That makes
These backstage
sense.
controversies painted a starkly different picture of a man who told us to eat your vitamins. Hulk Hogan, the icon, gave everything to the fans in the ring, but Hulk Hogan, the businessman, made sure he stayed on top, whatever the cost. It's a dual image that many who worked with him have had to reconcile: the beloved hero of their childhood and the cagey operator they knew at work. And as Hogan's career moved forward, that duality would only become more pronounced. By the early 1990s, the bloom of Hulkamania in WWF had begun to fade. The audience's tastes were changing, and Hogan's real American hero shtick was starting to feel dated.
We love Hulk Hogan or Hulk Mania Live Forever. I see a sign up that said, hey, did you take your shot today?
In 1994, sensing an opportunity of financial riches and a lighter schedule, Hogan jumped ship to World Championship Wrestling.
I missed wrestling so much that finally I caved and basically went to work for Ted Turner.
This was also coming off the heels of the WWF steroid trial, where Hulk testified against Vince McMahon, which angered the chairman.
Hogan is granted immunity for anything he would reveal on the stand about how he got his steroids from Dr. Zahorian while working for McMahon.
Though Hogan contends that his testimony was the reason the boss wasn't found guilty.
Vince didn't go to jail for 17 years because of me.
Hulk had simmed down significantly during this period, given all the controversy, since the Hulkster was
What a
considered the proverbial
coincidence.
poster boy for steroids in wrestling at the time. Hogan had also infamously lied about using steroids on the Arsenio Hall show in '91, after Vince wanted him to come clean and tell the truth.
I've trained 20 years, 2 hours a day to look like I do. But the things that I am not is I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids.
I myself personally have injected Hulk Hogan with anabolic steroids.
I injected Hogan with steroids many times.
Oh, he told me he'd been taking steroids for 1 full year at the time I met him. I believe his surgeries, all of his operations are linked to the steroid use.
The common laugh used to be when he used to tell the kids to say their prayers and take their vitamins. In the dressing room, we'd always laugh and say, orals or injectables?
Vince want to get younger.
Vince McMahon is probably thinking, do I want a diminished, thinner Hulk Hogan as my centerpiece, advertising to my audience how important steroids were to his look. So Vince McMahon had to shift his focus to smaller wrestlers who were more athletic.
Hogan's arrival in WCW
That's
was
fair.
a seismic event. The biggest name in the industry had defected to McMahon's rival. The Hulkster netted a $2 million a year contract with a creative control clause. That meant Hulk never had to do anything with his character he didn't want to. And he
when you think about that too, that is just crazy to be in the wrestling business and have something in your contract where you can say if you don't agree with this, so they're like, hey, we need you to drop the belt, you know, we gotta give it to this upcoming star for, like, I mean, it's not your employer technically because we just talked about the union stuff, but just for them to be able to try and do that, and then you're just like, nah, that does not work for me, brother. We want to go this way. I'm not dropping the belt to this person, and that's in your contract that's allowed. I don't understand how that would ever be approved, but you know, it's a good thing I'm not in the business itself, right?
Wasn't done transforming, Hulk Hogan was about to pull off the most famous heel turn in wrestling history. Initially, WCW presented Hogan exactly as fans knew him, in the red and yellow fighting foes like Ric Flair. But by 1996, Hogan's act was growing stale again.
Yes.
Then came Bash at the Beach 1996. Hulk Hogan betrayed the fans and aligned himself with the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, to form the villainous faction known as the
Look at all that trash in the ring.
NWO. The impact was immediate and extraordinary. The NWO took the wrestling world by storm, and Hogan, now calling himself Hollywood Hogan dressed in black and white, was once again at the center of a mainstream wrestling boom. Fans who had cheered him for years now poured their hatred onto him, and Hogan reveled in it, reinventing himself as the ultimate bad guy. This gamble helped change WCW's fortunes. With Hogan leading the way, the promotion surged in popularity, overtaking the WWF in TV ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. It was Hogan's star power, coupled with a cutting-edge storyline, that helped WCW rise to the top of the wrestling world. For Hogan, the WCW run added an important chapter to his legacy. He proved that he could be the villain just as convincingly as he had been the hero. As Hollywood Hogan, he collided with legends like
Starrcade,
Sting, Lex Luger, and Goldberg, while also sharing the squared circle with huge names outside the ring like Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, and Jay Leno. The NWO's rebellious cool factor vibe, with Hogan at the helm, permeated pop culture in the late 90s, appearing on magazine covers and talk shows. Once again, Hogan's presence was turning wrestling into water cooler conversation. But the WCW chapter was not without its controversies either. Hogan's creative control clause and backstage politicking in WCW became notorious. Still, in terms of legacy, his WCW run cemented Hollywood as a two-act superstar, the ultimate babyface of the 80s and the ultimate heel of the 90s. Few wrestlers have ever reshaped their personas so drastically and succeeded so wildly. Once again, Hogan was at the center of another mainstream outbreak of wrestling during the NWO era, and it solidified him as a transcendent figure in the industry for a second time. After WCW folded in 2001, Hulk Hogan was back in WWE.
Wow, yeah, that was a pretty quick summary of his WCW stuff. I thought they were going to go into like Starrcade 97, all that. That's a whole other can of worms to open up. His situation with Sting, obviously the stuff how he left at Bash at the Beach 2000 with Jeff Jarrett and Vince Russo. His WCW run was arguably the most controversial of his entire career, besides, you know, post-wrestling stuff. Yeah, crazy.
A year later, WrestleMania 18 in Toronto featured an icon vs icon showdown, Hollywood Hogan vs The Rock. It was a dream match bridging generations. Hogan entered as the villainous NWO leader, but left as the hero. The bell rang and suddenly the tide turned. The Toronto crowd exploded with adoration for Hogan, cheering his every move and booing The Rock. The planned roles didn't matter anymore. The fans had spoken. They wanted the Hulkster back. Hulkamania was running wild once again, decades after its birth.
Hulking up.
The Rock ultimately won the match as Hulk passed the torch. Then after the pinfall, in a show of ultimate sportsmanship, The Rock beckoned Hogan to pose for the crowd in a cathartic release. It was a moment of pure wrestling magic, the kind that gives you goosebumps. Hogan, visibly moved, acknowledged an audience that had never forgotten him. Following that WrestleMania, WWF swiftly pivoted.
Look at the response from these people, JR!
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Hulk Hogan shed the villain persona and returned to his beloved red and yellow attire. Just 1 month later, Hogan challenged for the undisputed WWE Championship. In a fairy tale moment at Backlash, he defeated Triple H to win the title once more at age 48 as the crowd went wild.
Hulkamania is real! It is reality! Can you believe it?
Week after week and arena after arena, fans of all ages relived the magic, chanting at the top of their lungs. The nostalgia was real, and Hogan was clearly touched by the outpouring, often unable to speak due to the deafening reactions. This triumphant return underscored an important truth. The public still loved Hulk Hogan. A 20 years in the making personal feud with Vince McMahon later followed, which hit on the real-life drama between Hulk and Vince. McMahon had made Hogan a star in WWF, only for Hulk to leave for WCW. It was an obvious story to tell, and its execution made for some great TV TV. Hulk Hogan's career in the ring wound down in the 2000s, but he never truly left the public eye. He dabbed in reality TV.
Hogan knows best.
Exposing his family life to fans, but it wasn't a TV show that would make Hogan front page news again. It was a scandal that shook his legacy to its core. Over the years, fans became increasingly aware of incidents that cast a shadow over the man behind the mustache. During his son Nick's time in jail for a 2007 car crash that left his friend John Graziano with permanent brain damage, Hogan was caught on tape making racially charged comments in a recorded jailhouse call. His personal life also drew its share of public scrutiny. Hogan divorced his longtime wife Linda in 2009 after a tumultuous, messy separation that played out in tabloids.
I don't know how he could do this to his family, to his peers, to the world, and still keep his chin up and act like he's done no wrong.
In October 2012, the gossip website Gawker made a shocking post. Clips from a secretly filmed Hogan sex tape. The footage showing Hogan in an intimate encounter and recorded without his knowledge unleashed a media firestorm. Embarrassed and furious, Hogan launched a legal war against Gawker for invasion of privacy. The law
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's going to go, because they kind of just skimmed over a few things, so let me just go back a little bit. So they were talking about the racist scandal stuff. I see a lot of people online that are like trying to defend it, because if you haven't seen it, literally just look up like Hulk Hogan racist rant or racism scandal or something. You'll be able to find the transcripts. He says the N-word a bunch of times. It's very derogatory, and a lot of people are like, oh, like you can't completely cancel this man forever or not like him because he said a few words in his private life, because it wasn't, it was a recorded conversation. He wasn't like on TV saying it. But first of all, yes, I can. Like, don't tell me what I can believe or feel about a person. And then second of all, it's not the word itself, which, well, first of all, it is, but I'm talking about, even if you put that aside, it's the insinuations or the things it says about him as a person and his beliefs. If he's so comfortable with saying that, obviously he has these racist views, and as a person, that is a problem in somebody that makes me not like them as a person. And so moving on a little bit to this situation, this is kind of the contrary, because this stuff, Bubba the Love Sponge was supposed to be Hulk Hogan's friend, and he was there for Hogan's hard times, and then apparently it was something like Hogan was like divorced or something, like he was going through a tough situation with his his ex. They were going through all legal issues, and he was depressed, and Gawker, Bubba the Love Sponge, was basically a cuck, and he didn't want Hogan to be down or whatnot, and he didn't have issues sharing his wife, so he was like, oh, hey, go ahead and make Hogan happy or whatnot. And they recorded that situation without his consent, and that is why he sued. So that is absolutely, I understand Hogan's issue. You can't do that, you know what I mean? So I totally understand this situation, though.
Lawsuit, Belia vs. Gawker, became a high-profile battle over celebrity privacy and freedom of the press. In 2016, Hogan scored a victory in court. A jury in Florida awarded him $140 million in damages. Gawker was financially crushed, bankrupted, and forced to shut down its website. It was a triumphant moment for Hogan in one sense. He had vanquished an enemy outside the ring in the courts. But as that courtroom drama played out, a far more damaging revelation emerged. In 2015, amid the legal battle, transcripts of the sex tape's audio were leaked to the public. What they revealed was appalling. Hulk Hogan, in a private conversation, repeatedly used the N-word and made racist remarks about his daughter's boyfriend. The man who urged a generation to be a real American was caught on tape spewing vile, bigoted language. The fallout was swift and severe. WWE immediately cut ties with Hogan upon the leak, scrubbing its website of all references to him overnight. The once beloved Hulk Hogan was now radioactive. He was publicly disgraced, and his reputation seemingly destroyed in the eyes eyes of many fans. Hogan quickly issued an apology, but even that drew criticism. In a tearful Good Morning America interview, he insisted,
"I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong."
While some accepted his contrition, others pointed out that Hogan often seemed more sorry about being recorded than about the hurtfulness of his words.
And it's exactly what that was. It was a glitch. It was a huge mistake. The worst thing I've ever said.
Backstage, WWE brought Hogan in to apologize to the locker room in person in 2018, an effort to pave the way for his return, but the reactions were mixed at best. Black wrestlers were not quick to forgive.
Guys that were like, man, the hell with him. And I had guys that was like, you know what, man, if you're willing to make a change and try to help out and go and speak up and be a part of the answer rather than a part of the problem, then it's all good.
The New Day faction released a powerful statement that made their stance clear. How do we feel? Indifferent. They wrote acknowledging Hogan's place in history, but making it known they would not celebrate him. It is impossible to even begin to mention the history of the business without mentioning his name and accolades, but on a personal level, when someone makes racist and hateful comments, we find it simply difficult to forget. We do not associate with the people who conveyed this hurtful mindset. This instance will be no different. Perhaps if we make a genuine effort to change, then maybe our opinion will change. Time will tell. Their message, respect the career but distrust the man, spoke volumes. Titus O'Neil likewise voiced discomfort. He pointed out that Hogan's locker room apology fell flat. Titus noted that Hogan apologized for not realizing he was recorded, which to Titus is not remorse for the hateful and violent utterances he made. He said many colleagues felt Hogan's speech lacked true contrition, remorse, and a desire to change. In other words, Hogan's words did little to heal the wound. Titus, like the New Day, didn't call for Hogan's banishment. In fact, he acknowledged Hogan as a Hall of Famer and hero and icon to countless people, but he expected Hogan to truly own up to the harm done and work to fix it. As of then, in Titus' view, Hogan had not done enough. Even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of Hogan's most famous opponents, and a global star in his own right, weighed in on the scandal. The Rock, whose own family is part black and Samoan, said he was disappointed at Hogan's comments. "I had not known the man to be racist," The Rock said, noting that his personal experiences with Hogan had been positive. Yet he did not excuse Hogan. He said what he said and he's paying the price, Johnson remarked matter-of-factly. The price was evident. For 3 years, Hulk Hogan was persona non grata in WWE. It was as if his career had been erased. Many thought it was the end, that the greatest icon wrestling ever produced would live out his days estranged from the industry he helped build. The fall from grace was astonishing in scale, from worshipped hero to disgraced outcast. But in 2018, WWE cautiously opened the door for Hogan's redemption, bringing him back for select appearances. The company cited Hogan's numerous public apologies and efforts to educate youth as reasons for giving him a second chance. Hogan himself frequently expressed hopes that fans would forgive him in time. Yet, as Hogan re-entered the wrestling sphere, it was clear that things would never be the same. The adoration that once greeted him was now mixed with apathy or even opposition from portions of the audience and locker room. Hulk Hogan's legacy, once almost universally celebrated, had become deeply divided, and that divide would be on full display the next time he tried to step into the spotlight. In 2021 at WrestleMania 37, WWE tried to ease Hogan back into the spotlight by naming him co-host of the event with Titus O'Neil. But even in his hometown of Tampa, Hogan was audibly booed throughout both nights.
Bro, these two WrestleManias feel like a fever dream. They really, because you know, it's because this whole racism scandal happened that they were just like, oh yeah, let's just pair him with Titus O'Neil, you know, that'll show that he's not racist. It just kills me to this day. Like, there was this specific segment where Titus O'Neil and Hogan were dressed up as pirates with like pirate hats on. Crazy. I can't believe they did that.
Of the show. The cheers for Titus only made the contrast starker.
Welcome to WrestleMania Sunday!
Because you know that why they're doing
the wounds from Hogan's past still hadn't healed, and no pairing, no matter how beloved, could change that. Later, his support for Donald Trump sparked fresh backlash. Hogan aligned himself with an ideology that further polarized the public's opinion of Hulk and ultimately his legacy. Wrestling fans would also make note of the many times Hogan has lied or stretched the truth about certain things he's done to picture him in a better light. The lies related to things he'd done in his professional career and said during public appearances or written in books and articles. And perhaps it relates back to how in his own own words, anytime Terry Bollea stepped outside his house, he became Hulk Hogan, meaning in public, he was always in character in some form, hence the tall tales, or indeed misremembering, that painted Hulk in such a distinguished light compared to the actual truth of the matter. In January 2025, WWE kicked off a bold new era, the historic premiere of Monday Night Raw on Netflix, streaming live for the first time. To celebrate, the company leaned on nostalgia, including an appearance from Hogan. Hogan's music hit and the arena erupted, not in cheers, but in boos.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Hogan walked out with his old manager, Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart, playing to the crowd and even promoting his new craft brew, Hogan's Real American Beer. But the Los Angeles audience wasn't having it. He tried to win them over, but the jeers only intensified.
You, the fans, have been my greatest tag team partner because you guys have stuck with me through thick and thin, dudes.
Yeah, we're not
Backstage, wrestlers and legends watched this unfold in real time. Some, like The Undertaker, even found a bit of poetic justice in it.
Hogan returned? Here we go. Here we go. We grew up seeing Hogan as this great thing.
Bigger in life, Americana kind of deal. And then obviously, you know, he gets caught on tape, you know, saying some derogatory racist things. And, you know, in this day and age where all of that is such a hot button deal. Like, I don't know what you expect. Like, people are gonna, you know, they're gonna react, and they're not gonna react in a positive way.
It was a striking statement. A fellow legend essentially saying Hogan had reaped what he sowed. The negative reception at Raw's Netflix debut became the talking point of the night, overshadowing even the matches. Media outlets picked up the story of Hulk Hogan being booed out of the building, and the incident reignited debate about his standing with fans, though it was clear.
And it's also with this, you know, a lot of people are like, it's solely because of his political affiliation. You know, he's a Republican, he's a known Trump supporter, and they were in, if I'm not mistaken, it was Los Angeles. It was somewhere out west. You know, it was a very liberal crowd. And I can understand how that would play a factor. I don't want to act like that is not at all taken into consideration. But you also have to consider the fact that Undertaker, who was also another known Trump supporter, was cheered by all the fans that night. There was no in-between or heavy boos from the crowd. They liked him. They didn't have any issue with him. So it's a lot more than just political stuff, you know?
A broad portion of the fandom still couldn't look past Hogan's transgressions. The Netflix premiere debacle stands as Hogan's final WWE moment, not a fond farewell, but rather an awkward, painful reminder that the world had changed. The red and yellow hero, who once could do no wrong in the eyes of fans, had become someone many refused to cheer. Aligning with Trump won't have helped Hulk's cause either, given this show was in California. On July 24, 2025, news broke that shocked the world of sports entertainment. Hulk Hogan had died at the age of 71 due to cardiac arrest. Within minutes, social media lit up with reactions, and a familiar schism appeared. On one side, an outpouring of tributes for a childhood hero and a pillar of wrestling history. On the other, a chorus of voices reminding everyone of the complicated legacy he left behind. The tributes were indeed numerous and heartfelt. It was clear that to many who knew or were inspired by him, Hogan was a legend of legends. The wrestling world mourned the loss of the icon, who for better or worse had made their industry what it is. But amid the praise there was backlash, some subtle, some overt. Many fans and commentators on social platforms pointed out that Hogan's tributes were omitting the uncomfortable parts of his story, but some felt that it was a time to focus on the positive, the childhood memories. The Hulk story inspired people. Others argued that it's impossible to talk about Hogan now without acknowledging the hurt he caused and the trust he betrayed. And yet, for all the criticism, the respect for Hogan's impact was still profound. So now we are left with a complicated picture. Hulk Hogan is gone, but the conversation about him has perhaps never been louder. On one hand, you have legions of fans and colleagues saying thank you for the memories, the inspiration, the larger-than-life charisma that made them fall in love with wrestling. On the other hand, you have those who cannot and should not forget the pain of his hateful words, or the colleagues whose careers he might have stiffed along the way. In death, as in life, Hogan remains a figure of debate. One thing is certain, Hulk Hogan's legacy will not be a simple one-liner. It's as complex as the man behind the character. As fans, we are left to reconcile the two faces of Hogan. Hogan, the embodiment of American-made superheroism and the flawed human who fell from grace. Some have already made up their minds one way or the other. Many more will continue to wrestle with it in the years to come. In the end, the tale of Hulk Hogan is a cautionary epic. The meteoric rise, the cultural domination, the hero worship, and then the painful fall and search for redemption. It forces us to ask difficult questions about our heroes. Can we separate the art from the artist? How do we honor accomplishments while acknowledging faults? And what do we value more in our icons? Their contributions to our lives, or their conduct outside the limelight? How will Hulk Hogan ultimately be remembered? As the beloved hero who made professional wrestling a global phenomenon, the larger-than-life icon who embodied the hopes and dreams of a generation, or as a tragic cautionary tale, a reminder that even our biggest icons have human flaws that can shadow their legacy? The answer may not be easy, and it may not be unanimous. Perhaps the legacy of Hulk Hogan will forever lie somewhere in between glory and infamy, a complicated legacy. But what isn't complicated is how much Hulk did for his industry. Hogan stands side by side with Muhammad Ali, Babe Ruth, and Michael Jordan, and though it's time to say goodbye to the biggest icon in wrestling, his spirit is still running wild. Hulk Hogan is immortal, and Hulkamania will live forever.
Wow, man. So that was a great video by Wrestling Flashbacks. I will put the link to the original video in the description, so go show that some love if you want to. And man, it's hard to even compile or say my thoughts because, like he has said numerous times throughout this video, it's so complicated because it just depends on your perspective and your as a person. You know, if you're a person of color, that's going to affect you more personally, and so I totally understand if you have that type of reaction. Hulk Hogan, I just think it's so surreal that he passed. You know, it doesn't feel real even a week after it's happened. I mean, just y'all remember that this man is dead. Like that's it forever. So for right now, I am giving his family time to grieve. I feel like people should not be going out and trying to disrespect him because they knew him personally and feel a certain way about this loss. So may he rest in peace. And I know that he was, you know, I'm not a very religious person per se, but I do know that at the end he got baptized. He says that he found God, I guess. So the whole heaven hell situation, that's between him and God, you know. I feel like I'm not the person to determine that. Let me say though, with politics, I feel like Hogan, like I said, it's a double-edged sword, because with the politics, I feel like I try not to make this I don't want to share my political views on this or on anything really, because this is a wrestling channel. But I will say, when it comes to politics, people on the conservative side try to, I guess, like, excuse his stuff because he was somebody who agreed with their views towards the end of his life. And what I think with any situation like that, whether it be a Republican or Democrat, I think that when you have somebody that is such a known liar and racist, you shouldn't defend him because he agreed with your points. I think that you should be outraged that he's on your side, because you should have somebody of better character representing your beliefs. Because then if you have somebody that's a racist and is known for lying about stuff, then that's going to be associated with your party. You know, you don't want people being like, oh, Trump supporters are racist and just stuff like that. You get what I'm saying? It's not a good representation. So that's what I will say about that stuff. And yeah, complicated situation for sure. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like, comment below your thoughts on this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the greatest city in the world, Wrestling City. That's about it. I will see y'all next time. Peace.